Hey everyone, Dave from BC Bushcraft. I'm going to show you how I shape this knife using a Sawzall and bench grinder and files. So basically right here all I'm doing is marking my steel so that when I take my Sawzall out it can find the cut quite easily. So I used a triangular file to create that, and then I went ahead and started to cut out the general shape of the knife. And basically the Sawzall blade here is obviously a metal blade, and it's meant to do stuff like this. So I went ahead and cut off my stock, and then I started to cut small lines down towards the scribe line for my knife. I did my scribe line, I basically drew out on a piece of paper the general profile of my knife, and then I scribed around it onto the metal, which I had covered with permanent marker. So that's why the metal is black there. So I just continued to make cuts along the scribe line to help when I do my downward cut, which I am doing right here. And basically when you do those cuts all the way along the metal, it helps to clear out the chunks of metal, making the job easier. So even if you're hand hacksawing this, it's a good idea to make those stop cuts along the way so your hacksaw blade doesn't get jammed. So here I'm just continuing to use the Sawzall all the way down, and right here I'm going to do a nice long cut. And you can see that I'm doing this kind of back and forth motion. That's because I started to feel I didn't want to wear the blade necessarily in one area, so I was trying to use different parts of the blade. And here I am cutting out the kind of finger choil part to the knife, which I did kind of 2 downward cuts on an angle for either side. And while I was doing this, I had pulled the Sawzall blade out too far and I totally bent it. And the problem with the Sawzall that I have is that the release clip for the blade doesn't work, so I actually have to take apart my Sawzall just so I can change the blade. So that caused a little bit of headache, but that's how it goes. Anyways, it worked really well. It's a lot faster than hacksawing it out, and you can get quite close to your scribe line by using the Sawzall. So from here I went and took it to the bench grinder. This is my landlord's bench grinder, who he kindly has allowed me to use it, so that's why it's in this video. The Sawzall is actually mine, and basically I just went and continued to remove material all the way down to my scribe line here. So I just keep grinding away, and you know, I probably could have taken it a little bit further than I did in this picture here. It saves a little, you know, filing and stuff like that. So anyways, onto the choil part, you kind of have to get in there with some round files. So I suggest that you have a multitude of round files. Definitely have a nice big coarse round file for your choils, and also a variety of smaller ones. The smaller ones definitely help to clean it up and shape it and create a really nice finger groove, because this knife is going to be quite small. It's only about 5 inches long with a 2-inch blade. I kind of wanted to have some nice security there. Right here I'm just draw filing and finishing up the kind of profile of the blank, and this helps to get a nice square edge. So here is the knife all ready to start putting the profile on. Basically with this profile, I kind of wanted to do a hand profile, all done by hand, not use any guides or anything like that. So right here I'm just marking my center line, so I know not to go too far when I'm doing the bevel of the knife, and I'm just using a permanent marker, and then I'm going to scratch it with a drill bit, and I basically scratch it and then flip the knife over and scratch it again, and that gives a pretty accurate guide of where the center of the bevel is going to be, which you can see here. Then here I just mark out a really general idea of where my bevel is going to be, so I'm going to try to make quite a fairly high bevel. And then I decided to try to take it to the grinder and grind off some material before I started filing it. And what I noticed as soon as I started is that the blade gets really hot and you should have some water to dip it in. So after about a couple passes on the grinder, I realized how hot it gets and went and grabbed a little bucket of water just to dip it in. I found it quite hard actually to kind of grind a decent bevel doing it this way, so I basically just removed materials to make the filing step a little bit easier so I didn't have to file too much. Yeah, this is definitely the first time I've tried to shape a blade like this, so I'm just kind of going on the fly with this one. Now here I went to the file and you can kind of see the grind marks of the bench grinder, and I really wanted to make this profile all by hand without any filing jigs. So one thing that I really struggled to do is make a really nice plunge line doing it this way. I'd watched I think Walter Sorrells, he kind of does it without a jig and he uses his thumb like I'm doing here, and I found it incredibly hard to get a nice plunge line by freehanding it. But I really wanted to try to freehand my own bevel and kind of create a flat grind, but it's not really a flat grind. I kind of made it into a convex grind. So here I'm just trying to get that plunge line established, which I found quite hard, and I just continued to work on down the blade. And one tip that I do have is that when you're filing the bevel, it's nice to kind of mark it, cover it with some permanent marker just to see where you're filing, and basically bring your filing line all the way up to the top. So here I'm just basically watching how much of the permanent marker I'm removing, and then I'm just continuing on up the blade until I basically get up to the point that I want my bevel to be. So I tried to bring my bevel quite high, and I didn't care too much to create like a really nice grind line. I just wanted to make a decent bevel. So in the sanding stage, I'm kind of going to blend it all into one, so I'm not really aiming to have a flat surface, if you understand what I'm saying. So maybe in this view you can see a little better. I got a fairly straight bevel on it. I left some room for the heat treat and stuff, so it still needs to come down a little bit, but I got a pretty straight edge just from doing it by hand. And I basically plan to hand sand it so it's kind of a transition all the way from the blade up to the spine, and it's not going to really have a flat area per se. So this is definitely a really interesting and fun project, and I suggest that you try it out. I kind of just used the available tools that I had, and this is kind of how it turned out. So next I'm going to continue on and try to finish off this knife, drill the holes for the handles and things like that. So I hope you like this video. This is Dave from BC Bushcraft. Please like, please subscribe, and until the next video, I hope you have a good day.